How are we doing this morning? Good. Good. Well, in seeing everything that's going on in our city and our community and hearing Pastor Tim's story about what God's doing in all these various places, I was reminded of a scripture in 2 Samuel 10:12 that I just want to share with us before we get into the word this morning. And I think it applies, and I think it's something that we as a church that we can really take to heart and we can carry with us, and we can know without a doubt that God has us here in this city for this time for a specific purpose. 2 Samuel 10:12 says, "Be strong and courageous. Let's fight hard for our people and for the cities of God. And may the Lord's will be done." It's just an encouragement, church, that we are called to fight for this city, to see God's heart go out of this place and into each and every home and business and every place where people walk. I believe that a church that carries the heart of God offers an incredible hope to the community that they sit in. This morning we're continuing in our series entitled Rise, Stories of Awakening. Last week, Pastor Hoyt shared with us about a man named Lazarus and how Lazarus had fallen asleep, but even more specifically, he had died physically. He was in the grave, and yet Jesus came along and he called Lazarus from death into life. Pastor challenged us to remove the clothes of death, the things that we've been wrapped up in that have held us in the grave. We had an awesome response where we had an opportunity just to come before God and say, "Would you please, God, awaken us? Would you make us alive again?" This morning we're going to look at the story of a man named Samson. And our title for this morning is Awakened to the Battle. You see, church, it's important that we understand that if we're going to walk out this life with Jesus, we need to have a revelation. We need to have our eyes open to the fact that you and I are in a battle. That there's a very real enemy and there's a very real fight that you and I need to be engaged in. We cannot just passively move through our spiritual life. We have to be awake and alert. We have to be engaged in the fight. We have to understand that our greatest battle is not before us, it's within us. The battle that counts is the one that you fight day in, day out, over the condition of your heart, over the direction that you're headed. If you have your Bible, I want to invite you to turn to 1 Peter 5:8. And we're just going to start here, and then we're going to take a look at the life of Samson. But I want us to take a look at this together. And I'm going to read out of the contemporary English version because I like the way that it simplifies this beginning part, and it shows us the urgency of this. 1 Peter 5:8 says, "Be on your guard and stay awake." Be on your guard and stay awake. Your enemy, the devil, is like a roaring lion, sneaking around to find someone to attack. Other versions say that he's prowling around like a lion, seeking someone whom he may devour. Be on your guard and stay awake. Your enemy, the devil, is like a roaring lion, sneaking around to find someone to attack. Let's pray together. Father, would you open our eyes this morning? God, would you stir our hearts? Would we be awakened to the battle that's going on, God? Father, I pray that we would become aware, we would become alert, Father, that we need to be engaged in this. We need to step into the fight and not just passively walk out our spiritual walk. God, we're hungry for a revival in our hearts. And if that's going to happen, God, we've got to become aware of this. God, would you use me? Would you speak through me? Would your word be the most important thing this morning? Would your truth be what's heard? In Jesus' name, amen. I used to love roller coasters. Yes, I used that word on purpose. I used to love roller coasters. For whatever reason, the older I get, the less I tend to like roller coasters. In fact, I found out that I have this, I don't know if it's age, I don't know what it is, but I can hardly even be on a swing set anymore without my stomach doing that, oh, what's happening, type of thing. But I loved the idea of roller coasters. I loved the ups and downs. I loved the thrill of them, the twists and the turns. I think some of my favorite pictures that I've ever seen in life are those pictures that happen right when people are coming down the big steep hill of a roller coaster and nobody knows that their picture is being taken. But just at the end of the roller coaster, as you walk off, you get to see everybody's faces. And you see some people's faces look like they're having the time of their life. Their hands are in the air and they're like, yeah, this is great. Ah! And some people's faces look like they are meeting the end of their life. They are holding on with everything that they have and they are... It's amazing to me how often life can feel like a really old, rickety roller coaster. How often it feels like you're just flying up and down and twists and turns and you're being thrown this way and thrown that way. And it's one of those old wooden ones, so you barely feel like the thing is even going to hold together. And you find yourself, as you almost fell right there. See how dangerous just talking about roller coasters is dangerous. As you're coming down those steep declines, you feel yourself starting to rise up out of the seat. That's what life feels like a lot of times. And sometimes it's up, sometimes it's down, sometimes it's just a fight to hang on and to not feel like we're flying off or falling down. The life of Samson is kind of one big roller coaster ride. As you read through his life, you see this man who experienced these great victories and these awesome ups, and he also experienced these terrible defeats. These low lows. You see a man whose decisions led him one step after another of just kind of twisting and turning and shuffling and being thrown this way and that way. And Samson is a story that teaches us one very important thing. It teaches us that the important things we do in private outweigh the impressive things we do in public. Samson won all kinds of outward battles and lost all kinds of inward battles. Somewhere along the way, he fell asleep to the battle that really mattered. This morning, we're going to take a look at just a couple of examples from the life of Samson. And we're going to ask God to stir our hearts. God, would you open our eyes and help us to see where we need to concentrate our fight this morning. We're going to ask God that He would teach us not to be so concerned with the impressive things we do in public, but to be more concerned with the important things we do in private. See, Samson began his story with a whole lot of promise. See, Samson's parents, originally they weren't able to have children. And then an angel of the Lord shows up in Judges chapter 13, and he says, "Behold, I have some great news for you. You're going to have a child, and this child is going to launch the deliverance of my people from the Philistines." See, the Philistines had been oppressing God's people for 40 years at this point. The whole book of Judges is this one continuous cycle and roller coaster of where God's people have this issue and this failure to be fully committed to Him. They say, yes, we're going to serve God with our whole hearts. We're going to be faithful to Him. And they start walking that out. And then somewhere along the way, they kind of get distracted. And they start being unfaithful to God. And so God eventually delivers them into the hands of an enemy. And then they cry out and they say, God, we were wrong. We messed up. We're turning back to you. And God, in His amazing mercy and love, raises up a leader and says, okay, I'll deliver you out of the hands of your enemy if you'll turn back to me. Samson's design, his purpose, was to be that leader and to live a life that would show the people that there's a better way. The angel shows up to Samson's parents and says, this boy of yours is going to launch this deliverance, but he needs to live his life differently than the whole rest of the culture around him. Your son is supposed to be set apart and live a life that's holy so that people can see that I am holy and they can turn back to me and have hope again. So God said, Samson, your son, is going to be a Nazirite. He's going to be dedicated to me. Sometime outside of here, I want to encourage you, read Numbers chapter 6 and learn more about this Nazirite vow that Samson was a part of. I'll give you kind of the quick highlights. There's kind of three big highlights of it. Basically, he was not supposed to drink alcohol. He was not supposed to touch dead things. And he was not supposed to cut his hair. You have to understand that this Nazirite vow wasn't some legalistic ritual that God was trying to put him through. It was symbolic. It was supposed to point people towards His holiness. He was set apart so that people would know there's hope in a better way. That's how Samson's story begins. But remember, Samson's story is a roller coaster, filled with all kinds of ups and downs. Judges 14, we see that first downward swing in Samson's life. It says, then Samson went down to Timnah and saw a woman in Timnah, one of the daughters of the Philistines. Who was Samson supposed to deliver the people from? The Philistines. So he came back and he told his father and mother, I saw a woman in Timnah, one of the daughters of the Philistines. Now, therefore, get her for me as a wife. Then his father and his mother said to him, is there no woman among the daughters of your relatives, or among all our people, that you go to take a wife from the uncircumcised Philistines? But Samson said to his father, get her for me, for she looks good to me. Samson's first mistake was this. Samson developed a desire for the enemy he was supposed to defeat. Samson saw something that looked good, and he went after it. He didn't care if it was from the enemy, if it was the enemy. He just knew that she looked good. How often do we fall for things that look good? How often have I developed a desire for the very enemy I'm supposed to defeat? One of the things that I love in life are donuts. I love donuts to the point where it may be a problem. But you don't have to convince me. There's no lie in my head that I'm believing about whether or not donuts are good for me. I'm not confused about them, but they taste great, and I love them. And so I'll keep coming back to them. We do that in our lives, though, spiritually. We know the things that are toxic and harmful. We know the things that lead us in a wrong direction. We know the things that will eventually, ultimately destroy us, and yet they look good to us. And they're comfortable. And we love them. And so we'll go back to them. Time and time again. Oh, I know that pornography is destructive, but it's comfortable and I like it. So I come back to it. I know that this bitterness and this unforgiveness that's inside me, I know it's a poison that's in me, but it makes me feel like I have this control over something, and so I'll come back to it. We develop a desire for the enemy we're supposed to defeat. We have to remember that just because something looks good, just because something tastes good, sounds good, feels good, doesn't mean that it is good. Right. Samson missed the point. And it blows my mind that this is the first thing we see of Samson's adult life. Judges 13 says he's going to be the one who launches the deliverance from the Philistines. And Judges 14, verse 1, Samson sees a Philistine woman and falls for the enemy. You and I have to choose to fight against the enemy, not fall for the enemy. James 4:7 says, "Submit therefore to God, resist the devil, and he will flee from you." Submit therefore to God, resist the devil, and he will flee from you. There's an important piece of that gets left out often. We hear a lot of times, resist the devil and he will flee from you. He doesn't flee because you resisted. If you and I had the strength in and of ourselves to resist the devil, then what would we need God for? He flees from you because you submitted to God. Because all of a sudden you're under new management. Your authority is not yours, it's now God's, and He can't stack up against the authority of God. So it's not just your resisting that matters. It's your submitting that matters. So in those desires, you can try to convince yourself all day long not to have the desire, but until you submit the desire. Say, God, this does look good to me, but I submit to you. Then you can resist. That is resisting. Your act of resistance is to submit. That's how we fight our battles, by submitting. The second mistake we see in Samson's life is that Samson embraced compromise and rejected conviction. Judges 14, 5-9 says, "Then Samson went down to Timnah, with his father and mother and came as far as the vineyards of Timnah. Remember in that Nazirite vow, there was one piece of that he's not supposed to drink anything that comes from the vineyards. And yet Samson is flirting with the line and coming close to the vineyards. He's not drinking anything from it, but he sure is hanging around with it. And behold, a young lion came roaring toward him. The Spirit of the Lord came upon him mightily, so that he tore him as one tears a young goat, which I have no idea how one tears a young goat. But I imagine it's pretty powerful and gross, is my guess. But he did not tell his father or mother what he had done. So he went down and talked to the woman, and she looked good to Samson. When he returned later to take her, he turned aside to look at the carcass of the lion. Samson's set apart. He's to live different. He's not to touch dead things. And he's so enamored by his past success that he can't help but go and look what I've done. And he comes closer and closer to the things he's not supposed to touch. And then we see him forgetting the line altogether and going ahead, crossing it because again, he saw something that looked good. It says he saw a swarm of bees and honey were in the body of the lion, so he scraped the honey into his hands and went on, eating as he went. When he came to his father and mother, he gave some to them, and they ate it, but he did not tell them that he had scraped the honey out of the body of the lion. You know, your compromise, my compromise, never just affects me. There's always collateral damage with compromise. Samson flirted with lines he knew he shouldn't cross. It's as if he looked and he said, my vow doesn't say don't go near the vineyards. It says don't drink what comes from the vineyards. Have you ever done that? Well, the Bible doesn't say that I can't. It doesn't say anything about me specifically doing this thing. It just kind of says not to do that thing. For whatever reason, as humans, we love to find ourselves tiptoeing closer and closer and closer to the line. And we like to see how close to the line can we get before we actually cross the line. And for some reason, we believe this idea that compromise is a slippery slope. You have to understand, compromise is way more than a slippery slope. Compromise is a cliff. It only feels like a slope because it usually takes a while before we hit the bottom. But once you begin your compromise, once you flirt with the line and say, well, I'm going to cross this line, you've begun your process. You've set your direction. And we can't move two directions at the same time. Samson's life was supposed to be a life that moved towards the holiness of God. Conviction. We don't like that word. I don't like that word. Because we think conviction, we think of this heavy thing that God puts on us, but that's not the point. We develop these convictions. We seek to be holy as He is holy. So we don't move towards the line of compromise. We step away from the line of compromise. We must choose to fight for conviction, not fall for compromise. Mark 8:36 says, for what does it profit a man to gain the whole world and forfeit his soul? Was it really worth it for Samson to take a nice scoop of honey and enjoy something delicious for a little while but to break his vow, to become apathetic toward the calling God had had in his life. The amazing thing to me is that in the midst of Samson desiring the enemy, in the midst of Samson choosing compromise over conviction, it says that the Spirit of the Lord came upon him and he defeated this lion. That God still uses us in the midst of our brokenness and bad decisions. Now, we can't make the mistake of believing that just because God uses us, that he also endorses our lifestyle. God is so committed. This is how great God is that he's so committed to loving and rescuing his people that he's willing to use all of us broken messes to do it. That he's able to still use us, to use people like Samson and accomplish his purposes and his will. He's so committed to you that he's willing to use this broken mess so that you would know how much you're loved and how he fights for you. The third one we see is Samson started using his God-given gifts to achieve his own self-driven desires. You'll see as you read through the rest of Judges 14 and you go into 15, you'll see a couple other places where it says that the Spirit of the Lord came upon Samson and he defeated his enemies. God used him in a mighty way. But then we get to Judges 15, 1 through 5, and it says, "But after a while, at the time of the wheat harvest, Samson visited his wife with a young goat." There's the goat thing again. I don't know what that's about. "And said, I will go in to my wife in her room. But her father did not let him enter. Her father said, I really thought you hated her intensely, so I gave her to your companion. Is not her younger sister more beautiful than she? Please let her be yours instead." Samson then said to them, "This time I shall be blameless in regard to the Philistines when I do them harm." Samson went and caught 300 foxes and took torches and turned the foxes' tails tail to tail, and put one torch in the middle between the tails. When he had set fire to the torches, he released the foxes into the standing grain of the Philistines, thus burning up both the shocks and the standing grain along with the vineyards and the groves. I can't imagine how challenging it would be to capture 300 foxes and tie their tails together. But Samson did it. But did you hear the thing that was missing? Just before it said, the lion came upon him and the Spirit of God came upon him and he ripped the lion in two. And then later it tells us that the Spirit of God comes upon him and he defeats 30 Philistines by himself. And later after that we're going to see that he takes a jawbone of a donkey and the Spirit of God comes on him and he beats 1,000 Philistines with a jawbone of a donkey. But when he catches the foxes, there's no Spirit of God that comes on him. It doesn't say, and the Spirit of the Lord comes upon him and he captures the foxes. You see, when God gives us a gift, he gives us a gift. But you and I are responsible for coming back to the giver of the gift and saying, this gift belongs to you and it will be used only for you. Samson was wrapped up in his own sense of needing revenge and his own desires and his own compromise. He just used the gift for whatever he wanted. We have to choose to fight for God's purpose, not fall for our own passions. The roller coaster of Samson's life is really incredible. And I would encourage all of you to take some time and really study it. To look through Judges 13 through Judges 16 and to read through it over and over and over again and say, God, what would you show me in this? By the time we get to Samson's final story, see, this is the most popular story. This is the one that we tell in Sunday school classes, and it's the one that they make movies about, and it's the story of Samson and Delilah. It's the story of how Samson yet again falls for another woman, and she begins to work with the Philistines to try to find out the secret to his strength. And so she begins to ask him, Samson, if you love me, you would tell me, you would trust me, you would confide in me and tell me the secret to your strength. And at first he kind of deflects and he gives her this answer that's not the answer, and she thinks it is, and so she says, Samson, wake up, the Philistines are here. And he wakes up, and of course, he still has his strength, so he defeats the Philistines. So she tries again. Samson, you must not really love me. Because if you did, you would trust me, and you would share with me your secret. And again, he gives her an answer that's not the real answer. And so she tries again, and she'll trick him. And Samson, wake up, the Philistines are upon you. And he wakes up, and he defeats the Philistines again. Eventually, she wears him down. Compromise will wear you down. It's where it says that Samson finally he told her all that was in her heart, his heart. The secret to his strength, he said, no razor has ever touched my head. And if my hair were to be cut, I would be as weak as any other man. So she tells the Philistines, this time we've got him, he's told me the truth. She lulls him to sleep. She invites the enemy into the room. And she wakes him up. Samson, the Philistines are upon you. And it says that Samson woke up thinking he would go out as before. He woke up thinking, of course I still have my strength. I'll go out and I'll defeat these Philistines. And one of the scariest, saddest scriptures I think I've ever read comes in Judges 16. It's verse 20. She said, the Philistines are upon you, Samson. And he woke from his sleep and said, I'll go out as other times and shake myself free. But he did not know that the Lord had departed from him. He just assumed that past success meant future security. I'm good. God's used me before. I can do this again. And he went out without his strength. He was overcome. He was captured. His eyes were gouged out, and he was made a slave. He was made cheap entertainment for the Philistines. The deliverer was now cheap entertainment. Here's what I love about God. There's always hope. When God's a part of the story, there's always hope. Judges 16:22 says, however, the hair on his head began to grow again after it was shaved. I don't know where you're at this morning. I don't know if you're wrestling with sinful desires, things you know you ought not to love, but you do. I don't know if you've been living a life of compromise and Holy Spirit's stirring you right now and you know you need to break your ties with compromise. Whatever it is, there's opportunity today to be awakened to the battle. Samson lost everything, and yet God offered hope. I want to take a moment and I want to talk to anyone in the room Maybe you don't have this relationship with Jesus. Maybe this whole battle and spiritual walk and all of this is kind of new to you. Maybe you're hearing about this and you're going, I don't know what this is, but I want that hope that you just talked about. Maybe you feel like your life has been one roller coaster ride of up and down, and maybe more downs than ups. This morning I want you to know that there's hope. There's hope. See, the truth is that we all sin. We all mess up. We all, just like Samson, do things wrong. We choose compromise. We chase our own desires. But the Bible tells us that if we confess our sin, if we come to Him with our mistakes and say, God, I blew it, I messed up, that He's faithful. He'll forgive us. He'll make us brand new. So this morning what I want to do is just want to ask that everyone in this room, if you close your eyes with me. If you're here this morning and you know that you and Jesus are in relationship, then I want you over the next minute or two, I want you to be praying, please. But if this morning you know that things aren't right, you know that you haven't accepted this gift of forgiveness, His mercy, His grace, this morning you have an opportunity. So if that's you this morning, if you would say, I know that I need help. I need this hope that you're talking about, this hope that comes from Jesus. If you would, right where you're at, if you would just slip up your hand so I can pray with you. Thank you. I see that hand. I see that hand as well. Anybody else? Just slip your hand up. I just want to see where you're at just so I can pray for you. Jesus, you see these hands that went up. God, right now this morning we are surrendering to you. God, I pray for these individuals that have said, God, I need this hope. I need this help today. God, would you bring joy into their life? Would they even right now, would they know that you are near to them, that they're not alone, and that they are forgiven? That they are forgiven. God, I pray for all of us in this room, for the areas where we've fallen asleep to the battle that matters. Would you wake us up this morning? Would you stir our hearts? Would you help us to engage in the fight once again? Would you show us that our act of resistance, our battle, the way that we fight this is by coming and submitting to you, God. I want to invite everybody in here, if you're able, would you stand with me as we prepare to close, as we prepare to respond to God? I want to invite the prayer team to come. If that's you this morning, if you know there's areas in your life that you need to submit to God, then I want to invite you to come find a place under these altars to pray with one of our prayer team members. And spend some time engaging in the battle again today. Those of you that raised your hand and made a decision this morning to follow Jesus, to surrender to Him, I want to invite you as well to come and find one of our prayer team members. They would love to pray with you and to talk with you, to tell you a little bit more about what this all means, the exciting good news that's available to you. There's not going to be an official dismissal. I just believe God wants some of us to respond and to submit to Him this morning. Father, we love you. We offer our hearts to you. We submit to you, God, and we engage in the battle. Would you free us from our compromise? Forgive us from our desires. Help us to turn our eyes towards you again. In Jesus' name. This is how I fight my battles. This is how I fight.